It was March 30th, 1981. Ronald Reagan, newly elected President of the United States. I was leaving a hotel in Washington, D.C. Cameras, crowd, security. In seconds, 6 shots. Reagan was hit, survived. 3 other people were shot. Press officer James Brady. He had permanent brain damage. The shooter was immobilized on the sidewalk. Young, white, from a rich family, no criminal record. When they asked why I had done that, the answer left the world speechless. He wanted to impress a movie actress, and when he went to trial, was considered innocent. What followed changed the American legal system forever. Welcome to Psyche Obscure. Today we will get into the case of John Hinckley Jr., the man who almost killed a president, out of obsession with an actress, and whose judgment completely redefined the defense for insanity in the United States. Who was John Hinckley Jr.? John Hinckley Jr. was born in 1955 in Texas, son of a successful oil executive, religious family, financially stable. On the outside, everything seemed normal. Inside, Hinckley was a deeply isolated young man. No close friends, no direction in life. He spent years living on his parents' allowance, coming and going between cities without a clear purpose. In 1976, he watched the movie Taxi Driver, and something has changed. The movie, starring Robert De Niro and Jodie Foster, tells the story of Travis Bickle, a disturbed loner who plans to murder a politician to impress a young prostitute. Hinckley watched the movie dozens of times. He began to identify himself completely with Travis Bickle, and he developed an intense obsession with Jodie Foster. He followed her to Yale University, where she studied. He left tickets. He called her room. He tried to establish a connection that existed only in his mind. And then he decided to do what Travis Bickle would do, a great gesture that would impress her forever. Block 2. The obsession and the plan. To understand what happened, we need to understand Hinckley's mental state. In the years before the crime, he had been evaluated by psychiatrists before the attack. The father himself worried about his son's behavior. I had taken him to treatment. The psychiatrist, after evaluation, concluded that Hinckley didn't represent serious danger. He recommended that parents stop giving allowance to force him to independence. 3 months later, Hinckley shot the president. What psychiatrists did not identify, or they didn't take it seriously enough, it was the degree of Hinckley's disconnection from reality. He had built a parallel world in his mind, where Jodie Foster would love him if he performed a sufficiently dramatic act, where he was Travis Bickle, where the murder was romanticism. That wasn't a metaphor. It was his reality. The Atomic. March 30th, 1981. Hinckley had followed Reagan for days. I was in Washington, D.C. with a legally purchased gun. When Reagan left the Hilton Hotel, Hinckley fired 6 times in quick succession. Reagan was hit in the lung. Secret Service agent Timothy McCarthy was shot in the abdomen. Police officer Thomas Delahanty was hit in the neck. And James Brady, the president's press officer, he was shot in the head. Brady survived, but with paralysis and permanent brain damage. He lived with the sequels until he died in 2014. Death that was officially classified as homicide caused by the 1981 injury. Hinckley was immobilized on the sidewalk. He didn't resist. He didn't run away. He seemed, according to witnesses, almost relieved. Later, it was discovered that he had written a letter to Jodie Foster moments before the attack. In it, he explained what he was about to do and why, to prove that he loved her, the judgment that shocked America. The trial of John Hinckley Jr. began in 1982, and it became one of the most controversial in American history. The defense presented extensive psychiatric report. Hinckley suffered from schizophrenia and narcissistic personality disorder. Your obsession with Jodie Foster and Taxi Driver had created a complete delirious reality. He didn't understand the criminal nature of the act. Inside his mind, he was performing a romantic gesture. The prosecutor's office argued that he knew what he was doing, that I had planned, that he had bought the weapon, who had chosen the time and place. In June 1982, to the shock of practically the entire country, John Hinckley Jr. was found innocent for reasons of insanity. The public reaction was furious. How could someone who almost killed the president to be considered innocent? The reform that came later. The verdict triggered one of the biggest reforms in the American legal system of the 20th century. The American Congress approved in 1984 the Insanity Defense Reform Act, the law that completely reformed the defense for insanity in the U.S. The changes were profound. Before, it was up to the prosecutor's office to prove that the defendant was mentally sane. Then, it was up to the defense to prove that the defendant was insane. A complete reversal of the burden of proof. The criteria for insanity have been drastically hardened. It was no longer enough to prove that the defendant did not understand the nature of the act. It was necessary to prove total inability to distinguish right from wrong. Several American states went even further, completely abolishing defense for insanity. The Hinckley case also accelerated changes in gun control laws, culminating in the approval of the Brady Act in 1993, which requires background check for the purchase of weapons, named after James Brady. What happened next? Hinckley was hospitalized in St. Elizabeth's Hospital, psychiatric security institution in Washington, D.C. In the following years, it continued to cause controversy, tried to correspond with serial killers, including Ted Bundy and Charles Manson. He tried to send manuscripts to a confessed murderer. For decades, requests for release were denied. In 2016, 35 years after the attack, was authorized to leave the institution and live under supervision with his mother in Virginia. In 2022, a judge declared his complete unconditional release. Today, he lives as a free man. He released songs on YouTube. It has its own channel. Posts videos about your daily life. James Brady died in 2014 with the sequels of The Shot. His death was classified as homicide. Hinckley was never sued for this. The victim died of murder. The shooter is free and posts videos on YouTube. This is the reality that the legal system has produced, and it's impossible not to feel the weight of this contradiction. The legacy for forensic psychiatry. The Hinckley case left deep and permanent marks. For the good, forced a serious discussion about how the legal system evaluates and treats serious mental disorders. It enacted legislation that protects victims of crimes with weapons, professionalized the criteria for forensic psychiatric evaluation. For evil, made the defense for insanity almost impossible to use successfully, even in cases where it would be genuinely justified. It created a climate of distrust in relation to psychiatry and the courts that persists to this day, and he left a question that still has no satisfactory answer: how a society balances justice for the victims with adequate treatment for those who act within a distorted reality. It's not a comfortable question, but it is one of the most important that any justice system needs to respond to. John Hinckley Jr. is 68 years old today. Post videos on YouTube. Make music. Live free. James Brady is dead. Ronald Reagan developed Alzheimer's years later. Some doctors speculated connection with the trauma of the attack, although this has never been proven. And the American legal system carries to this day the scars of a verdict that took less than a day to be pronounced and decades to be sued. Next week, we end this series with the most disturbing case of all, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, the mathematical genius who became a terrorist and divided forensic psychiatry between psychopathy and schizophrenia. If this video made you think, leave the like and activate the bell. The Obscure Psyche exists to go where it is difficult to look. See you next time.